It was one of those mornings when the city seemed to run on noise and rushing feet. The sun had barely climbed above the tall glass buildings, yet inside the tower that carried the name Cole Enterprises, the day was already in full motion. Elevators chimed, shoes clicked across the marble floor, and people hurried with coffee cups in hand, each chasing deadlines and trying not to cross paths with the one man everyone both respected and feared, Mr. Harrison Cole, the CEO. Harrison Cole was not an easy man to please. He had built his empire from almost nothing, climbing step by step until he became one of the most powerful men in the city. In his office on the 28th floor, everything was designed to remind visitors of success. The wide glass walls looked out over the skyline. His desk, polished to a shine, stood as a symbol of authority. Behind it sat the man himself, his dark suit pressed perfectly, his tie without a single crease, his expression always firm. That morning, Harrison was going through contracts. Numbers, signatures, and profit charts filled his mind. His pen tapped softly against the papers as his assistant entered quietly to remind him of the day's schedule. Meetings, calls, decisions, his hours were carefully packed. He liked it that way. It left no room for distractions. But distractions have a way of entering where they are least expected. Around 10 o'clock, his secretary, a woman named Mrs. Lang, appeared at the door. Her usual confident tone carried an unusual hesitation. "Sir," she began carefully, "there's someone asking to see you." Harrison didn't even look up. "Cancel it. Tell them I don't take unscheduled meetings." "It's not a client," she said, choosing her words as though they might shatter. "It's a little girl." That made him look up. His sharp eyes narrowed. "A little girl?" Mrs. Lang nodded, almost embarrassed by the strange request. "Yes, sir. She came to the reception desk. She insists she needs to speak with you directly." Harrison leaned back in his chair. He had seen all kinds of people try to get into his office: competitors, salesmen, reporters pretending to be delivery staff. But a child? This was new. He frowned. "And you thought it necessary to bring this to me?" "I tried to send her away," Mrs. Lang admitted, "but she wouldn't leave. She said, it's very important." There was a moment of silence. The efficient tick of the office clock seemed louder than usual. Harrison, always the man of logic, almost told her to escort the child out at once. But something in Mrs. Lang's face, perhaps the trace of sympathy, or perhaps curiosity, made him pause. "Fine," he said at last, his voice even. "Send her in. 5 minutes only." Mrs. Lang nodded and disappeared. A few moments later, the door opened again. And there she was. A small girl, no taller than the desk, stepped into the grand office as though she had just walked into a giant's world. Her shoes were scuffed, her dress plain but clean, her hair tied in a simple ponytail. In her hands she clutched something small, round, and pink. At first, Harrison thought it was a toy. Then he noticed the slot on the top. A piggy bank. She walked with careful, almost nervous steps, her wide brown eyes glancing at the tall windows, the expensive furniture, and finally resting on the man behind the desk. For a moment, she just stood there, silent, her little fingers tightening around the piggy bank as though it might protect her. Harrison waited. He was not a patient man, but he was curious now. "Well," he said at last, his deep voice filling the quiet room. "Why are you here?" The girl swallowed, her small chin lifting with determination that seemed far bigger than her frame. Her voice was soft but clear. "Sir, can I buy a dad?" The words hung in the air like a note no one knew how to answer. Even Mrs. Lang, who had stayed just inside the door, gasped softly. Harrison blinked. Surely he had misheard. "What did you just say?" The little girl's hands trembled slightly, but she did not back away. She set the piggy bank carefully on the edge of his large desk. The coins inside clinked against each other. Her eyes shone with a mixture of hope and fear. I saved money, she explained in the simplest way. I've been saving for a long time. I don't know if it's enough, but I want to buy a dad. For the first time in years, Harrison Cole did not know what to say. His world was measured in deals, in negotiations, in costs and profits. People came to him with offers, with demands, with numbers. But no one, absolutely no one, had ever come to him with such a question. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched until it felt like the very air in the office was holding its breath. The girl shifted her feet nervously. Please, sir. I just want someone to walk me to school. Someone to tell me stories before I sleep. I thought maybe, if I paid, someone could do that. Her words were not clever. They were not rehearsed. They were simply honest. And in their honesty lay a weight heavier than any business contract. Harrison leaned back slowly in his chair, his hand resting on the armrest. Something flickered across his face, something his employees had never seen before. A softness, a shadow of memory. Mrs. Lang, watching from the side, felt her throat tighten. In all her years of working for Mr. Cole, she had seen him cold, angry, sharp, even triumphant. But never did she see him look as he did now, caught off guard by the fragile courage of a child. The girl stood patiently, waiting for his answer, her small figure dwarfed by the vastness of his office. And for the first time in a very long while, the mighty Harrison Cole was at a loss for words. The little girl shifted nervously on her feet, her small hands clutching the piggy bank as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Her eyes, wide and shining with a mix of hope and fear, never left Harrison Cole's. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, sharp and intimidating, yet somehow softening as he considered her words. My name is Emma, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I live with my mommy. She works very hard, every day. Sometimes she works all night. She cleans offices and halls and sometimes even floors that are taller than me. She paused, glancing at the towering office walls and the polished furniture. For a moment, she looked small, fragile, like a bird in a storm. But then she straightened her back, her determination shining brighter than her fear. My mommy, she's amazing. She does everything she can for me. But, she's always tired. She's always busy. And I don't have a dad. I never met him. She hesitated, a small frown appearing on her forehead. I don't know why. Maybe he's somewhere else. Maybe he doesn't even want me. But I thought, maybe if I saved enough money, I could buy a dad. Harrison Cole remained silent, watching her carefully. There was something raw and honest in her words, something that cut through the walls he had built around himself over the years. In the world of business, everything had a price, and everything could be negotiated, but this was different. Emma continued, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger as she spoke. I have been saving for a long time. Every coin I can find. I ask people to help me sometimes. I even gave some of my birthday money to the bank so I could keep it safe. I have this much. She placed the piggy bank carefully on the desk. The coins inside made a soft clinking sound. Harrison looked down at the piggy bank. It was small, old, a little scratched from years of handling. He could see that the coins inside were only a handful. Not nearly enough to buy anything in the way business people thought about buying. But the weight of the piggy bank was nothing compared to the weight of the story it carried. Emma's eyes filled with hope and a little fear. I don't know how much money it takes to have a dad. I just thought, maybe someone could, maybe you could, help me. Harrison felt a strange lump in his throat. For a man who had spent decades measuring the value of everything in dollars and cents, this was a kind of question he could not answer with numbers. And yet, he could feel the honesty in her words, the innocence that did not demand, that did not threaten, only asked. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. He noticed the small things, the way her fingers clutched the piggy bank, the little scar on her knee from some fall she probably forgot about, the way her ponytail had a loose strand that kept brushing against her cheek. She looked like any other 7-year-old, yet her courage was extraordinary. She had walked into the office of one of the richest men in the city and asked the impossible. Emma noticed his gaze lingering on her and quickly added, "I know, it sounds silly. I know a dad isn't something you can buy. But I tried everything. I asked my mommy. She says, sometimes adults can't fix everything. She says, maybe someone will help me. That's why I came here." She took a small breath and continued, her voice quieter this time, almost as if speaking to herself, "I just want someone to love me. Someone who can be proud of me. Someone who will walk me to school and tell me stories. That's all." Harrison could feel the heaviness of her words in the room. He had been so focused on money, deals, and success that he had forgotten about the small, essential things that truly mattered in life. And here was a child, teaching him a lesson he hadn't realized he needed. Emma sat down on the edge of a chair, her legs swinging slightly. She wasn't demanding, she wasn't angry. She was just a child who wanted something simple: love, care, and presence. She didn't care about wealth or status. She didn't care about fancy cars or big houses. She cared about a father, a person who could simply be there for her. Harrison rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He remembered his own childhood, the emptiness of a father who was absent and a mother who worked tirelessly to provide for him. He had felt that loneliness before, and now he saw it reflected in this little girl's eyes. For a long moment, there was silence in the office, broken only by the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Then, almost instinctively, Harrison asked, "Emma, how old are you?" "I'm 7, she answered promptly. "And you came here, alone?" Emma nodded. "I wanted to come by myself. I didn't want anyone to stop me. I counted all my coins and thought, maybe if I go to the right person, maybe they can help me." Her honesty was disarming. Harrison could see that she was not asking for charity. She was asking for understanding, for connection, for a chance at something she had never known. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the desk. "Emma, you're very brave," he said. "Most kids your age wouldn't have had the courage to walk into a big office and ask a stranger this question." Emma's eyes lit up slightly at the praise. "Really?" she asked. "Yes," Harrison said. "It's not silly. It's very special that you tried. Very brave." She shifted, her small shoulders relaxing a little. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. I just want a dad. I don't care about money. I just want someone to care." Harrison looked down at the piggy bank again. He realized that the coins inside it were not a payment, but a symbol. A symbol of hope, courage, and trust. She had trusted him to understand her, to hear her, to help her. And in that moment, he realized something important: some things could not be bought. Some things like love, care, and presence had no price tag. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. This little girl, with her small body and big heart, was teaching him something that his wealth had never been able to teach: the true value of connection. Emma shifted again, sensing that she had said enough. She looked at him expectantly, hoping for a response, a hint that someone might care. Harrison, for once, did not respond with business logic, rules, or excuses. Instead, he simply looked at her, really looked, and nodded slowly. "I hear you," he said quietly. "I understand." Her face broke into a small smile, fragile but real. She had no idea that these words, so simple, carried more meaning than any coins in her piggy bank ever could. For the first time, Harrison felt something stir inside him that had long been buried under years of business, ambition, and control. He realized that wealth could never replace human connection, and sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest lessons. Emma stayed in the office for a few more minutes, talking about small things: her school, her favorite stories, and even the tiny adventures she imagined with a father she had never known. Harrison listened, asking questions, nodding, and sometimes laughing softly at her innocent excitement. By the time Mrs. Lang returned to the door, ready to bring the little girl back to her mother, Harrison had made a decision, a silent, unspoken promise to himself. He didn't yet know how, or when, or in what way, but he knew he would try. He would not sell himself as a father. He would not exchange money for love. But he would find a way to help this little girl feel the care she so deeply wanted. Emma picked up her piggy bank, unaware of the change she had inspired in the man sitting across from her. She had come looking for a father she could buy with coins. Instead, she had planted a seed that would grow into something far more valuable than money could ever buy. And as she walked out of the office, her small hand clutching her savings, Harrison Cole watched silently, feeling the weight of her words and the promise he now carried in his heart. Harrison Cole sat in his office long after Emma had left. The sound of the city outside, normally just background noise to his busy life, now seemed sharper, louder, and almost intrusive. He stared at the small piggy bank she had left behind, the soft clinking of coins still echoing in his mind, as though it carried a message he could not ignore. For decades, Harrison had been a man of control. Every aspect of his life was measured, calculated, and precise. His decisions had always been guided by logic, by numbers, by the cold reality of business. There was no room in his world for uncertainty, for softness, for questions that had no clear answer. And yet, here he was, sitting in silence, trying to process something that did not make sense to him. A 7-year-old girl had walked into his office and asked him for something that no money could ever buy. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The office, which usually brought him comfort and pride, now felt unusually large and empty. The high ceilings, the polished floors, and the glass walls that gave a panoramic view of the city, all of it seemed distant, unimportant. Harrison had built his empire on ambition and determination, but this was different. This demanded empathy, patience, and care, qualities he rarely allowed himself to use in business. He thought about Emma's words, her small voice trembling as she spoke about her mother working long hours, about never having met her father, and about saving every coin she could find. She had come into his office with such courage, with such honesty, that it was impossible to dismiss her. And yet, he hesitated. He had never been a father. He had never had to care for a child in that way. He had always believed that his life was too busy, too complicated, too important to make room for anything that might distract him from his work. And yet, for the first time in years, he felt something stirring inside him, a tug at his heart that was unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Harrison's mind raced. He thought about the practicalities. How could he help a child he barely knew? What if he failed? What if he couldn't provide the kind of guidance, love, or presence she needed? He had never faced such a situation before. He was a man of business, not a man of hearts. And yet, he could not stop thinking about her small, determined face and the hope that had shone in her eyes. He remembered his own childhood, growing up without a father. The emptiness he had felt, the nights when he had wished for someone to tell him he was loved, the mornings when he had longed for encouragement before stepping into the world, all of it came rushing back. He realized, with a pang of guilt and longing, that he had never allowed himself to remember those feelings until now. And in remembering, he felt a sudden, undeniable connection to the little girl who had so bravely approached him. Harrison leaned forward, his elbows resting on his desk, and stared at the piggy bank once more. It was just a small object, worn and scratched, but it carried the weight of Emma's hopes and dreams. She had entrusted him with something precious, even unknowingly. She had come seeking a father, not money, not gifts, not charity. She had come seeking care, guidance, and presence, things that could not be measured in dollars or contracts. He felt a deep internal struggle. Part of him wanted to retreat, to dismiss the request as unrealistic, to return to the familiar world of meetings, profits, and control. That part of him whispered, "She is just a child. This is not your responsibility. You cannot fix everything." But another part of him, a part he had long ignored, insisted that he could not turn away. It reminded him of his own lonely childhood, of the absence he had felt, and of the chance to make a real difference in someone's life. That voice was quieter, gentler, but far more persistent. "You can help her. You have the means, the time, and the heart to do it. Don't let fear stop you." Harrison's thoughts drifted to the possible consequences. Helping her would require commitment, patience, and emotional investment, things he was not accustomed to giving freely. It could disrupt his life, his routine, and perhaps even his reputation. But the more he thought about it, the more insignificant those concerns seemed compared to the opportunity to provide something Emma had been longing for her entire young life. He closed his eyes and imagined her walking into the office again, her small hand holding the piggy bank, her eyes searching for hope. He saw her nervous, trembling, but brave enough to ask for what she wanted most. And he realized, in that moment, that his hesitation was not about practicality, it was about vulnerability. Harrison was not used to being vulnerable. He had spent years building walls around himself, ensuring that no one could reach the part of him that was sensitive, lonely, or unsure. But Emma's visit had cracked one of those walls, and now he could feel the emotions he had long suppressed: compassion, tenderness, and the desire to protect. He stood up from his chair and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. People moved like ants along the streets, caught in their own routines, unaware of the moment unfolding above them. Harrison thought about the small things he had overlooked in life: the laughter of children, the warmth of a family, the simple joy of being present for someone who needed you. He realized that no amount of wealth, power, or success could replace those moments. For a long time, he remained at the window, thinking, planning, and questioning himself. Could he really take on the responsibility of being a father figure? Could he provide the guidance, attention, and care Emma needed without expecting anything in return? The questions weighed heavily on him, but he knew that the only way forward was to try. Harrison sat back at his desk, the piggy bank in front of him, and made a silent promise. He would not treat this as a transaction. He would not measure love or care in coins or dollars. He would approach it with patience, empathy, and commitment. He would find a way to be the presence Emma had been longing for, in whatever form he could. He thought about the first steps. He could start small, checking in on her, ensuring her mother had support, perhaps arranging little outings where he could spend time with her. He could be there without trying to replace her mother, without imposing, without expecting anything in return. It would take time, effort, and emotional investment, but he was determined to try. Harrison leaned back in his chair again, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments of uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose that went beyond business deals and profits. He had the chance to make a real difference in a life that truly mattered. The sound of the office clock ticking seemed less intrusive now, almost comforting. Harrison realized that his life, which had always been guided by logic and control, was about to change in ways he could never have anticipated. And he felt ready, for the first time, to embrace something unpredictable, something real, something human. He looked down at the piggy bank once more, running his fingers over the smooth, worn surface. It was small, fragile, and imperfect, just like the connection he hoped to build. But it was also a symbol of hope, courage, and trust, and he would honor that trust with everything he had. Harrison Cole, the man who had spent a lifetime chasing success and power, had made a decision that no business deal, no contract, and no financial calculation could ever compare to. He would step into the unknown. He would try to be there for a child who needed him. And in doing so, he would discover a part of himself that had long been hidden, waiting for the right moment, and the right little girl, to bring it to life. After that morning when Emma had first walked into his office, Harrison Cole found himself thinking about her constantly. Every time he glanced out of his office window, looked at the city buzzing below, or reviewed contracts, a small part of his mind wandered back to the little girl with wide brown eyes, holding a piggy bank, and asking the impossible question, "Sir, can I buy a dad?" He realized that her visit had changed something in him. The rigid routines, the constant meetings, the endless pursuit of profit, these things suddenly felt less important. For the first time, Harrison understood that true value was not measured in money, stocks, or property. True value was in connection, care, and presence. He decided that he could not let Emma down. He would start small. That very afternoon, after his last meeting, he called her mother, Mrs. Jenkins, and asked if he could visit them. He chose his words carefully, knowing that she might be skeptical. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said quietly, "I met Emma today. I want to help. I don't know exactly how, but I'd like to spend some time with her, if that's okay." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mrs. Jenkins was surprised, unsure whether to trust the wealthy CEO who had suddenly entered their lives. But then she thought of her daughter, of the hope that had shone in Emma's eyes, and she agreed. When Harrison arrived at their small apartment that evening, he felt an unexpected nervousness. He had spent years making decisions with confidence, yet now he was about to meet a child who had trusted him before even knowing him. He rang the doorbell, straightened his jacket, and waited. Emma opened the door, her face lighting up with recognition. "Sir," she exclaimed, her small hands clapping together. Harrison smiled, a little awkwardly, and crouched down slightly to meet her at eye level. "Hello, Emma. How are you today?" "I'm good. I saved more money today," she said proudly, holding up her piggy bank. But then she paused, as if noticing something new. "Are you really coming in?" "I am," Harrison said gently. "I promised I would try. And I always keep my promises." Emma's mother watched quietly from the side, her eyes soft with gratitude and relief. She had been worried for so long about her daughter's loneliness, about the absence of a father figure in her life. Now, seeing Harrison step into their home with sincerity, she felt a cautious hope. That evening, they had a simple dinner together. Harrison was not used to small kitchens or simple meals, but he found himself enjoying the experience. He listened as Emma told him about her day at school, about the stories she loved, and about the small adventures she imagined with a father she had never known. Harrison laughed softly at her excitement, asking questions and showing genuine interest. Over the next few weeks, Harrison made it a habit to visit Emma regularly. Sometimes they went to the park, feeding ducks by the pond and playing on the swings. Sometimes they sat in her tiny apartment, reading stories aloud or building little cardboard castles together. Each moment, though small, created a bond that grew stronger with time. Harrison was careful not to overwhelm her. He knew that he could not replace her mother or erase the years of absence, but he could be a steady presence in her life. He learned to listen without judgment, to guide without forcing, and to care without expecting anything in return. Emma, in turn, began to trust him more each day. She shared her dreams, her fears, and even her silly little jokes. She would run to him with small drawings, proudly explaining each one, and Harrison would smile, praising her creativity and effort. The warmth in her eyes, the laughter that echoed through the small apartment or the quiet park, became something Harrison cherished more than any business achievement. Her mother noticed the change in both of them. Emma seemed happier, more confident, and more secure. Harrison, too, had changed. The cold, controlled exterior he had always maintained softened. He smiled more easily, listened more patiently, and carried himself with a lightness that had long been absent. One Saturday, Harrison took Emma to a local bookstore. She ran through the aisles, her small fingers brushing the edges of colorful books, her eyes wide with excitement. Harrison followed behind, watching her enthusiasm, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. She picked out a book about a little girl who went on magical adventures and clutched it tightly to her chest. "This is for you," Harrison said. "We can read it together." Emma's face lit up. "Really? For me?" "Of course," Harrison said with a gentle smile. "We promised each other we would spend time together, didn't we?" That day, as they sat on a bench outside the bookstore and read the story aloud, Harrison realized something important. It was not about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about presence. It was about showing up, listening, and being there consistently. That was what made a difference in a child's life. The bond between them grew steadily. Harrison learned to anticipate Emma's needs, whether it was helping with her homework, cheering her on at school events, or simply sitting quietly beside her when she needed comfort. Emma learned to trust him, to confide in him, and to rely on his guidance. Together, they created moments that mattered, moments that would stay with them forever. Harrison also began to support Mrs. Jenkins in subtle ways. He offered help with school supplies, occasional tutoring, and even small gestures to make her life easier. He never imposed himself or acted as if he was buying his way into their lives. Instead, he was a steady presence, a quiet guardian who cared deeply and sincerely. Over time, the neighbors and friends who knew Emma began to notice the change. She laughed more, her confidence grew, and she began to speak of her friend who helps me learn and play, always careful to explain that he was not replacing her family but was someone who cared. Harrison noticed these changes too, feeling a quiet pride in the small victories that came from kindness, attention, and genuine care. One evening, after a long day of reading, drawing, and playing, Emma turned to him and said softly, "Sir, thank you for being here. I like when you're around." Harrison felt a lump in his throat. He knelt down to meet her gaze. "Emma, I promised I would try to help. And I am glad I get to spend time with you. You make my days brighter too." Her small hand reached for his, and in that simple gesture, Harrison felt the warmth and connection he had never realized he was missing. He had stepped into an unknown world of emotion, care, and vulnerability, and it had transformed him in ways no business achievement ever could. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the bond between Harrison and Emma grew stronger. They shared laughter, quiet moments, adventures, and stories. Harrison learned patience, empathy, and the joy of being present. Emma learned trust, security, and the comforting knowledge that someone cared for her unconditionally. Harrison often reflected on that first day, remembering the courage it took for Emma to walk into his office and ask the question that changed both their lives. He realized that love, care, and connection could not be measured in coins or contracts. They were priceless, and they could transform even the most guarded hearts. Through small acts of kindness, consistent presence, and genuine attention, Harrison and Emma created a bond that went beyond titles, money, or circumstances. It was a bond built on trust, care, and mutual respect, a bond that neither time nor distance could easily break. And in this bond, Harrison discovered a new kind of wealth. One that could not be measured in dollars, stocks, or property. A wealth made of moments, laughter, stories, and love. Months passed, and the bond between Harrison and Emma grew stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a tentative promise had transformed into something deeper, a genuine connection built on trust, care, and shared moments of joy. Harrison had become a steady presence in Emma's life, showing up consistently, not as someone filling a role for reward or recognition, but simply because he wanted to be there. Emma thrived under his guidance. At school, she became more confident, raising her hand more often in class, volunteering for small tasks, and speaking to her teachers with a quiet, calm assurance that had not been there before. Her mother noticed the change immediately. Emma was no longer the small, timid girl who hesitated at the edges of life. She laughed more freely, shared her thoughts openly, and approached each day with a sense of excitement and curiosity. Harrison noticed the change too. The walls he had built around himself over decades were slowly softening. He found himself smiling more, listening with patience, and valuing small, simple moments over meetings, contracts, and profits. He had discovered a part of life he had long ignored, a part that could not be bought, sold, or measured. It was a wealth of the heart, a richness that came from love, trust, and connection. One crisp autumn morning, Harrison walked with Emma to her school for a special event, a small recital where the students would perform songs and poems they had been practicing for weeks. Emma held his hand tightly, her face glowing with pride and nervous excitement. "Will you watch me, sir?" she asked softly. "Of course," Harrison replied, smiling down at her. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." As Emma performed on stage, Harrison felt a swell of pride and emotion. He cheered louder than anyone in the audience, clapping with genuine enthusiasm, his eyes never leaving her. After the recital, Emma ran into his arms, hugging him tightly. "You saw me. You really saw me," she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with joy. Harrison hugged her back, feeling the warmth and trust she had placed in him. "I always see you, Emma," he said softly. "And I always will." At home that evening, Harrison sat down with Mrs. Jenkins to discuss the small changes they could make to ensure Emma's continued growth and happiness. They talked about school activities, books, and learning opportunities. Harrison listened carefully, offering support without judgment, and Mrs. Jenkins felt an ease she had not known in years. She realized that Harrison was not just helping Emma, he was helping their family feel stronger, more secure, and loved. Over time, their routine became natural. Weekdays included short visits, story time, and homework help, while weekends often brought small adventures, trips to the park, visits to museums, or simple outings to the local library. Harrison learned to anticipate Emma's needs, noticing when she needed encouragement, a gentle word, or simply someone to listen. Emma, in return, grew comfortable sharing her hopes, fears, and small everyday experiences with him. One day, while walking through a quiet park, Emma turned to him and said, "Sir, I used to think having a dad meant someone who could buy things or give gifts. But now I know, it's about being here. Being with me. Listening. Caring." Harrison smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. "That's right, Emma. That's exactly what it means. And I will always be here for you." Her small hand slipped into his, and he realized that the bond they shared had become more than a promise, it had become a relationship based on trust, love, and understanding. He had given her something far more important than money or gifts, his time, attention, and care. And in return, he had received something equally invaluable, the joy of connection, the warmth of love, and a sense of purpose that no boardroom could provide. Emma's growth became evident in her schoolwork, her friendships, and her daily life. She began helping younger children, sharing her stories, and showing kindness to classmates who seemed lonely or afraid. Harrison watched her transformation with quiet pride, understanding that the small moments of presence and guidance could have a lifelong impact. At home, the little family of Emma, her mother, and Harrison formed a rhythm of support and love. They celebrated birthdays, school achievements, and even small personal victories together. Harrison realized that he had never truly understood what it meant to belong to something greater than himself until he became part of Emma's life. The richness he had chased through wealth and power paled in comparison to the joy he now felt from being present for someone who mattered. On a particularly quiet evening, Harrison sat with Emma on the couch, reading one of their favorite storybooks. She leaned against him, her small hand resting in his, and whispered, "Thank you for being my dad, sir." Harrison felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. "Emma," he said softly, "I didn't come to be a dad for you because it was easy or because it was expected. I came because I wanted to be here. And being your dad, being here for you, is the most important thing I have ever done." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I know, sir. And that's why I love it." That's why I love you." Harrison felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling he had long forgotten amid the chaos of business and ambition. In that small moment, he understood that love, trust, and presence were not things to be bought or calculated, they were lived, nurtured, and shared. And he had the privilege of sharing them with someone who needed them most. As the months turned into years, the bond between Harrison and Emma remained strong. She grew into a confident, kind, and happy young girl, always carrying with her the lessons of courage, honesty, and love that had begun with a simple, brave question, "Sir, can I buy a dad?" Harrison, too, had changed. He approached life with greater empathy, patience, and understanding. He found joy in the small things, valued human connection over profit, and discovered that the greatest success was not measured in wealth or status, but in the love and trust of those who mattered most. Even in the bustling office of Cole Enterprises, Harrison's perspective had shifted. He treated his employees with more kindness, listened more carefully, and valued relationships alongside business decisions. The little girl who had walked into his office months ago had left a lasting impact not only on his life but on the way he viewed the world. One evening, Harrison stood by the window in his office, looking out at the city lights that sparkled like stars. He thought about Emma, her laughter, her stories, and her courage. He thought about the first day she had walked in with her piggy bank, unsure and hopeful. And he realized that she had given him a gift far greater than any fortune he could ever amass. He had learned that the richest moments in life were not found in wealth, power, or success, but in love, care, and presence. Emma had taught him that even the smallest voices, the smallest hearts, and the smallest acts of courage could change lives, sometimes in ways unimaginable. Harrison smiled, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment that had eluded him for years. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, decisions, and responsibilities, but he also knew that he had discovered something permanent, unshakable, and priceless, a true connection, a bond of love and trust, and the joy of being there for someone who truly needed him. And in that bond, Harrison realized, lay the true measure of life's wealth. Not money. Not success. Not power. But love. Presence. Care. And the courage to open one's heart, even when it feels impossible. Emma no longer asked if she could buy a dad. She had found one in the most unexpected place. And Harrison, once a man defined by wealth and ambition, had discovered the richest treasure of all, a heart transformed by love, a life made meaningful, and a bond that would last a lifetime.